Chapter 637. Imperial Capital, Dark Thunder Guard Headquarters. Li Juqing stood with his hands behind his back. There were 3 people behind him, all of whom were at the unity of heaven and man realm. They were the most powerful force of the Li family. 2 of them were Li Juning and his 4th uncle, who had once tried to kill Ling Shiqi. As for the other person, he looked 70% similar to Li Juqing. He was Li Juqing's younger brother, Li Jugu. The 4 unity of heaven and man realm experts gathered here. None of them spoke, but the room was shrouded in a layer of invisible killing intent. After a long while, a small ball in Li Juqing's hands silently glowed, and lines of text emerged. He immediately said in a cold voice, "Ling Shiqi went to the 6 kingdoms of the western region alone. This is an excellent opportunity. This time, I don't want to see him come back. Do you understand?" Li Juning's eyes were incomparably sinister. Last time, he had frantically gone to search for Ling Shiqi's whereabouts, but in the end, Ling Shiqi had snuck back to the imperial capital without anyone noticing. This had caused him to feel greatly ashamed, and he had even been secretly criticized by others in the Li clan. He cupped his fist and said, "Big brother, don't worry. This Ling Shiqi first took Ningyang County and then killed 2 of our top disciples. I'll make sure he doesn't return." Beside him, Li Juyu also nodded silently. As for 4th uncle, a trace of hesitation flashed through his eyes. "In the end," he said, "to be safe, it's best if only the 3 of us go. No matter who meets Ling Shiqi, they can easily kill him. However, Ling Shiqi is cunning and has all kinds of mysterious techniques. It won't be easy to find him in the 6 western countries. 4th uncle, don't worry about this." Li Juqing smiled and said, "You just need to spread out and block the way back to the Thunder Flame dynasty. Take these things with you." As he spoke, he gave each of them a storage pouch. Li Juqing continued, "Inside this is a temporary array disc that I paid a huge price for. Once you set up this array, you will be able to sense all the spiritual auras within 100 miles. Each of you will have a dozen of them. You will use this to set up an inescapable net in Zhu Lu country and Lei Yan dynasty. As long as Ling Shiqi dares to show himself, he will be discovered. That will be the time of his death." Only then did 4th uncle relax and say, "If that's the case, then it's absolutely safe. But you have to be careful." Li Juqing reminded, "You have to kill him outside the borders of the Thunder Flame dynasty. The Western Thunder Flame army is stationed at the border of the Western Baron Prefecture. If we make too much noise, they might notice us." Li Juning twirled the jade flute in his hand and said, "If I were to meet him, I would be able to kill him in one move. I would definitely do it secretly." Li Juqing glared at him. "Don't underestimate that Ling Shiqi. It wasn't luck that he killed Li Zhongtao. Moreover, he entered the heavenly tomb not long ago and his cultivation increased greatly. No one knows what he obtained in the heavenly tomb. No matter who catches him, they must do their best. You can't let your guard down." Li Juqing coughed and said, "Understood, understood." Ling Shiqi naturally didn't know that Li Juqing was going to kill him here. He even sent out 3 unity of heaven experts. He was still consolidating his cultivation in the mansion of the dead. He also calculated the time and waited until almost 24 hours had passed before stopping. It was still late at night outside. Moreover, an entire day had passed. There shouldn't be many people left in the royal mausoleum. However, Ling Shiqi still summoned the Gu King to hide his aura and used a secret technique to hide his body. In the royal mausoleum outside, after a day of tidying, it was basically repaired. However, there were still some formation masters strengthening the formation of the royal mausoleum to prevent people from sneaking in the future. The place where the coffin of the first king of the kingdom of Tuoba was originally placed had been replaced with a memorial tablet. Everyone was concentrating on setting up the formation. However, at that moment, a beam of red, blue, and yellow light suddenly lit up there. The light instantly attracted the attention of some people. However, when they looked over, the light had already disappeared. One of them rubbed his eyes and said, "Am I hallucinating because I'm too tired?" There seemed to be a beam of light just now. It's not a hallucination. I saw it too. What's going on? Shoo, another person suddenly said mysteriously, lower your voices. Have you forgotten where you are? It's normal to be a little strange. Don't make a fuss. Hurry up and set up the formation. You're right. Let's get to work. They didn't know that Leng Shiqi had directly teleported hundreds of miles away using the fate skill. When he stepped on the ground, the stone hanging in his heart was finally put down. After all, there were still Unity of Heaven experts near the royal mausoleum. Although he was confident that he could forcefully teleport away when he was in the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, that would arouse the suspicion of King Tuoba and Ing Yuan. Then, the result that Leng Shiqi wanted would not be as good as he wanted. The reason why he only teleported hundreds of miles away was because he still didn't know what the outcome of last night was. He looked left and right. His position was near a town. This town was where Ing Yuan's diplomatic corps was going to arrive at. Leng Shiqi was prepared to gather information here and see if Ing Yuan and the kingdom of Tuoba had really fallen out. He then entered the town and prepared to wait for the arrival of Ing Yuan's diplomatic corps. They didn't arrive until the afternoon of the second day. This was the bad thing about diplomatic corps. They had to maintain their honor, so they didn't move quickly. Leng Shiqi used the supercilious eyes and the Gu King's ability to quickly get the answer he wanted. Ing Yuan really did fall out with King Tuoba. Since that was the case, Leng Shiqi had completed the mission given to him by Heavenly Lord He Yen. Now, he had to carry out his own mission, which was to investigate all the members of the diplomatic corps. There was no need to investigate the Starfall dynasty anymore. Yuan Ji and the other 5 demonic cultivators were dead. Yuan Ji was the only one left. Other than them, there were no problems with the rest of the diplomatic corps. Although Yuan Ji was still alive, Leng Shiqi heard that he had disappeared. Even if he returned to the diplomatic corps in the future, Leng Shiqi would be able to recognize him instantly as long as he closed the door. Therefore, the investigation of the Starfall dynasty and the hidden dangers were resolved. As for the kingdom of Tuoba, there was no need to continue investigating. They had offended the Starfall dynasty and couldn't even protect themselves, let alone plot against the Thunderflame dynasty. Therefore, Leng Shiqi planned to return and investigate the diplomatic corps of the Golden Tribe, the Great Moon Kingdom, the Jushur Kingdom, and the Beilu Kingdom. With his supercilious eyes and the Gu King's ability to hide, it was easy to investigate these things. He just had to travel for a while. Chapter 638. More than a month passed quickly. During this month, Leng Shiqi went back and forth between the 6 countries of the western region and inquired about various small countries. He really found something fishy. In order to get rid of these hidden dangers, he also experienced many dangers. Fortunately, he passed through them safely. Of course, with his personal ability, he couldn't investigate everything clearly. As for the rest, he had to leave it to his Dark Thunder guards. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was between Zhu Road Country and Beilu Country. He opened the system map and prepared to teleport back to the Western Desolate Province. When the system map opened, Leng Shiqi noticed one thing. A few hundred miles away from him, there were tens of thousands of people fighting fiercely. From the clothes of these people, it was clear that they were from Zhu Road Country and Beilu Country. Leng Shiqi was also slightly surprised. At this time, the Beilu Country's diplomatic group should have arrived in the Western Desolate Province. Moreover, they could only pass through Zhu Road Country. This meant that the 2 sides had reached a certain agreement. But why was there a conflict again? As long as it had nothing to do with the Thunderfire dynasty, Leng Shiqi couldn't be bothered. However, he still teleported to the vicinity of the battle and hid. Then, he saw hundreds and thousands of green soul fragments flying over and merging into his body, nourishing his physical body and spiritual power. At the same time, Underworld also absorbed all of these souls. In the blink of an eye, there were more than 1,000 souls in Underworld. There were a total of 3 conditions for Underworld to level up. The first was to recruit 2 members of Underworld. Leng Shiqi had invited Tudong and Princess Carol to Zhu Road country. This condition was fulfilled. The second condition was to absorb 3,000 souls. This condition was originally the most troublesome for him. Coincidentally, he came across the conflict between Zhu Road country and Bei Lu country. There were tens of thousands of people fighting each other. It had just started and more than 1,000 people had died. Therefore, it wouldn't be difficult for him to collect 3,000 souls. He couldn't help but sigh at his good luck. Leng Shiqi hid nearby and absorbed the souls while observing the battlefield. The overall strength of Zhu Lugua's side was slightly weaker. First of all, they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. In comparison, they were at least a quarter less than Bei Lu country. Furthermore, there were 50 to 60 spirit casters in the Bei Lu nation. Spirit spell casters had always been valued, especially when they joined a dynasty or a small country. They would be treated as VIPs. This did not mean that spirit casters were definitely stronger than ordinary spirit cultivators, but in this kind of large-scale war, spirit casters were simply too useful. For example, the 50 to 60 spirit casters from the Bei Lu kingdom were using large-scale spirit spell techniques that could instantly kill a large number of people. There were also some spirit casters who were using some restrictive spirit spell techniques, which provided great convenience for their own side. Although they were few in number, their overall effect was no less than 1,000 spirit cultivator of the same level. Leng Shiqi thought to himself, it seems like Bei Lu state came prepared. Zhu Lu state was caught off guard. The battle was abnormally intense. Not long after, Zhu Lugua showed signs of defeat. The generals leading the charge had already begun to break out of the siege. In the end, the battle ended with Bei Lu state's complete victory. Only a few hundred people from Zhu Lu state managed to escape, but Bei Lu state also lost a lot of people. As for the exact number, Leng Shiqi was the clearest. This was because his underworld had more than 5,000 souls. As a result, the conditions for underworld to level up were all met. Leng Shiqi first left the place and prepared to level up underworld. However, when he saw that it required 20,000 system coins to level up underworld, he felt a little heartache. He did not have much system coins on him, so he could only use his various resources to exchange for system coins. Fortunately, he was now rich. Even if he exchanged 20,000 system coins, he still had a large amount of resources left. Leng Shiqi's heart moved and entered underworld. He also saw the system prompt, territory upgrade conditions have been met. Do you wish to spend 20,000 system coins to level up territory? Yes. Leng Shiqi did not hesitate. However, a strong repulsive force immediately appeared beside him and pushed him out of underworld. He was forced to return to the outside world. Only then did he realize that another system prompt had appeared, territory upgrade requires 1 natural day. During the upgrade period, you will not be able to enter the territory. Leng Shiqi understood. At this point, if underworld was to level up again, it would be tier 3. It seemed that it was similar to the system's upgrade. Both required a certain amount of time. Anyway, it only required 1 day. Leng Shiqi did not mind. Then, he summoned the Gu King and transformed it into a pair of colorful glass wings and flew into the sky. He flew 1,000 feet in the air and headed straight in the direction of the Western Wilderness Province. He estimated that he only needed to fly for another 1,000 miles and wait for his fate's skill to cool down. Then, he would be able to return to the Western Wilderness Province. A few hours later, Leng Shiqi was flying peacefully. However, suddenly, his whole body trembled. An extremely strong sense of danger rushed to his head. Immediately, several invisible forces suddenly appeared in the air. These forces were invisible and untouchable. However, the terrifying power within them caused Leng Shiqi to turn pale with fright. Boom! Leng Shiqi instantly activated the wild demon blood beast form. Then, several invisible forces approached him. They seemed to be something like a blade or a sword. They were extremely sharp. After coming into contact with Leng Shiqi, they easily cut through his wild demon blood beast form. Several hideous wounds were torn open on his body. Even the wings on his back were torn apart. Ling Shiqi was shocked. He knew very well how strong his wild demon blood beast form was. However, it was still so easily cut open. It could even be said that if it were not for the layer of granite shield on the surface of his body, his limbs would have been broken. There was no need to think too much about such a powerful attack. Only a great master of the unity of heaven and man realm could do it. Ling Shiqi fell from high up in the sky. Waves of grey nirvana wind rose around his body, forming a gentle wind that supported him to land on the ground. At this moment, an elegant figure walked out with a jade flute in his hand. He said in surprise, "You're not dead? As expected, you have some skills. It was not in vain for me to come and kill you personally." This person was Li Juning, who had specially come to kill Ling Shiqi. It could only be said that Ling Shiqi's luck was not too good to be able to encounter Li Juning. If he did not fly back directly, but used the fate skill to teleport, he would not have encountered Li Juning and the other masters of the unity of heaven and man realm. Previously, he happened to encounter the battle between the Beilu Kingdom and the Zhulu Kingdom. Therefore, he absorbed tens of thousands of souls and met the requirements for the Mansion of the Dead to upgrade. This was considered good luck. But then again, if it were not for the fact that the Mansion of the Dead needed a natural day to upgrade, Ling Shiqi could not escape into the Mansion of the Dead and could only fight Li Juning head-on. Luck was really illusory. As the saying goes, every peck and every drink is predestined. Perhaps, this was his predestined tribulation. Chapter 639. Of course, Ling Shiqi didn't have time to care about this. He stared at Li Juning with cold eyes. Although he had never seen this person before, Li Juning and Li Jucheng were brothers and looked similar. Ling Shiqi could conclude that Li Juning was here to kill him. He thought that Li Jucheng would deal with him when he came to the West Desolate Province, but he didn't expect that Li Juning would block his way back. The most important thing was that there were not many people who knew that he left the West Desolate Province and entered the 6 nations of the West. To be more precise, there were no more than 10 people. Then, how did his whereabouts leak out? This meant that he had Li Jucheng's people around him. Was it Gao Yi? Was it Lian Yi? Or the Dark Thunder Guard of the West Desolate Province? Ling Shiqi pondered as he probed, "May I know who you are? You and I don't seem to have any enmity. Why do you want to kill me?" "Humph." Li Juning snorted and said, Lu Xingji, rumor has it that you are very smart, but I think you are just a so-so. Forget it, I have no interest in a dead person. Hurry up and take your head back to report." Li Juning held the jade flute horizontally, and a continuous flute sound came. There seemed to be a pair of gentle hands comforting one's soul, making one sink into it unknowingly. Strangely, the flute sound ignored Ling Shiqi's ears and directly hit his soul. Ling Shiqi's starry sea suddenly shook, and his primordial spirit immediately bloomed. From the outside, it could be seen that Ling Shiqi's huge spiritual power surged out, and the back of his head shone brightly, almost blocking 70 to 80% of the flute sound. Li Jucheng's eyes flashed with surprise. "I didn't expect you to have condensed a primordial spirit. You are really amazing. If I don't kill you today, you will be a big problem in the future." His killing intent grew stronger, and the flute sound suddenly changed, becoming like a stormy sea that swallowed everything. The invisible sound power came from all directions, and suddenly dozens of bloody wounds appeared on Ling Shiqi's body. Ling Shiqi opened his Byakugan, but to his surprise, even his Byakugan could not capture the invisible blade. He immediately formed a seal with his 4 arms at the same time. In an instant, a dragon flame formation with a radius of several hundred feet appeared. It was as if a golden pillar of fire had suddenly appeared, burning the air. At the same time, a mass of dense earthy yellow light gathered, forming a semicircular light shield to protect him. Ling Shiqi used both the 9 palaces fire formation and the earth pulse at the same time. He could not see where the sound attack came from, but as the pure gold earth dragon flame continued to surge, it almost covered the entire area within several hundred feet. The violent flames unintentionally burned away most of the sound attack. Even so, Ling Shiqi could see that the 9 fire pillars were being cut apart. Fortunately, he could also catch the traces of the invisible sound blades. He activated the earth pulse and tried to deflect the sound blades with anti-gravity. However, the shield of the earth pulse was broken apart after a series of noises. The anti-gravity could not block the invisible sound blades at all. Fortunately, the pure gold earth dragon flame and anti-gravity had reduced the power of the sound blades by more than half. Ling Shiqi's body lit up with a golden Buddhist light, and a sacred and solemn aura spread out. Invincible Vajra divine art. The evil and frenzied evil demon blood beast body and the sacred invincible Vajra divine art were activated at the same time. Ling Shiqi's demonic body was dyed with a layer of golden light, and the two completely opposite auras coexisted perfectly on his body. After being weakened, the invisible sound blades swept over and hit Ling Shiqi's body with a series of ding ding dang 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 sounds of metal colliding. At a glance, there were only a few faint white marks on his body. Li Juning's expression became even more sinister. He had already attacked 3 times, but he had not killed Ling Shiqi. Although Ling Shiqi looked like his flesh was torn open, Li Juning knew very well that Ling Shiqi was not seriously injured. At most, it was just some superficial wounds. He could not help but exclaim in his heart, "What a powerful body." Li Juning had extremely detailed information on Ling Shiqi, including all the spiritual techniques and special secret techniques he had shown in front of others. For example, the 9 palace fire diagram and the earth pulse that Ling Shiqi was using were all recorded, and their characteristics were also written down. However, Ling Shiqi's invincible Vajra divine art was not in the information. Especially the defensive power of the invincible Vajra divine art, it seemed to be even stronger than that of frenzied evil demon blood beast body. One had to know that when Li Juning had attacked Ling Shiqi, he had broken through the defense of frenzied evil demon blood beast body, but now he could not break through the invincible Vajra divine art. Damn it, this brat was still hiding something. Li Juning was in the unity of heaven and man realm, but after 3 moves, he only managed to slightly injure Ling Shiqi, which made him feel a little embarrassed. Ling Shiqi could roughly tell that Li Juning was in the early stage of the unity of heaven and man realm through these few moves. However, Li Juning and Li Zhongtao were both in the early stage of the unity of heaven and man realm, but Li Juning relied on his own abilities to break through, so he was much stronger than Li Zhongtao. Now that the mansion of the dead was closed, it would take at least a few hours for him to level up successfully. The Fate skill was also on cooldown, so there was no way he could drag it out. Now there were only 2 paths in front of him, either escape or fight. However, when he was ambushed, the wings that the Gu King had transformed into were cut off, and he could no longer fly. If he wanted to rely on the remnant wind lightning steps to escape from an expert in the unity of heaven and man realm, it would be unrealistic. Then, the only path left was to fight to the death. Ling Shiqi took advantage of the moment when Li Juning's attack was interrupted. He was unwilling to be beaten up passively. His hands quickly formed a seal behind his back, and the Nirvana remnant wind howled. However, these hurricanes did not directly rush towards Li Juning. Instead, they spread out and merged with the fire pillars in the 9 palace fire formation. The wind helped the fire, and the fire pillars formed by the red gold earth dragon flames directly turned into 9 raging hurricanes that swept through the world. At the same time, Ling Shiqi's main body held a long spear with both hands. The spear was stained with golden scales, and a piercing crimson cold air rose around him as he pointed it at Li Juning. The 9 dragon flame hurricanes burned everything and intertwined with each other, instantly trapping Li Juning. However, Li Juning's expression did not have a trace of panic. In the eyes of others, the 9 palace fire formation that merged with the red gold earth dragon flames and Nirvana remnant wind was extremely powerful, but in his eyes, it was still lacking. At this moment, he was staring at the long spear in Ling Shiqi's hand, because he recognized that it was the 10 directions floating snow spear. It was the 10 directions floating snow spear that originally belonged to Li Zhongtao. Ling Shiqi actually used Li Zhongtao's weapon to deal with him, which made Li Juning feel extremely insulted. He laughed sinisterly and said, you think you deserve to use the 10 directions floating snow spear? Die. As soon as Li Ju-ning's voice fell, the jade flute blew. The sound was sonorous and strong, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were charging fearlessly. In the void, countless invisible spears formed by sound appeared in an instant, wrapped in boundless killing intent, and stabbed towards Leng Shiqi. Chapter 640. Leng Shiqi's long spear shook and thousands of spear shadows appeared like a surging wave. The clearly sharp spear shadows formed a golden wave that rolled backwards. What was strange was that the golden waves were mixed with traces of crimson ice rivers, leaving behind strange ice crystals wherever they passed. Countless sparks flashed in the sky, and ear-piercing sound spread in all directions. At the same time, the dragon flame hurricanes suddenly gathered and went to kill Li Ju-ning. Li Ju-ning knew that Leng Shiqi could use multiple spirit techniques at the same time, but he could do it too. As he blew the sound kill spear to kill Leng Shiqi, he stepped lightly and his body floated like a ghost, shuttling back and forth in the raging flames. Although he was occasionally touched by the pure gold earth dragon flame, the clothes on his body had ice threads that flowed like light. It was unknown what material the ice threads were made of, but they were actually able to resist the pure gold earth dragon flame. Leng Shiqi's heart sank when he saw this. It could be seen that Li Ju-ning had come prepared. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The Dark Thunder Guard headquarters had too much information about him. Moreover, his control over the crimson gold earth dragon flame was indeed too narrow. Currently, he only had the 9 palace fire diagram as a means to deal with it. The 9 palace fire diagram supported by the pure gold earth dragon flame was indeed very strong. It was enough to threaten a great expert of the unity of heaven and man realm. Especially when encountering devil cultivators or spirit cultivators who cultivated cold qi, it had a very strong restraining effect. For example, Li Zhongtao was like this. Most of his ice spirit energy was suppressed by the pure gold earth dragon flame, which led to his death. However, Li Ju-ning was completely different. He actually cultivated an extremely rare sound-type spiritual skill. Although the crimson gold earth dragon flame itself might have been able to affect Li Ju-ning was already prepared. He had a treasure that could restrain flames. As a result, the heavenly earth dragon flame was actually unable to play any role. Since this was the case, Leng Shiqi's heart hardened. The dragon eye hurricane that was originally a fusion of wind and fire was now rapidly repelling each other. The surrounding wind and fire spiritual energy became abnormally violent, and waves of heat continued to spread out. If there was a spirit pulse realm cultivator here, they would probably be directly blasted to death by the heat waves. The Leng Shiqi actually caused the crimson gold earth dragon flame and nirvana remnant wind to explode. Li Ju-ning's expression also changed slightly. In the face of such a powerful attack, no matter how fast he was, it was useless. He had no choice but to retreat. But once he retreated, the effectiveness of his sonic spear would be greatly reduced. On the battlefield above him, he had the absolute upper hand. Leng Shiqi's golden spear shadows had already been destroyed to pieces. As long as he had 1 or 2 more breaths of time, he would be able to break through them. In other words, if Leng Shiqi had not used the 7th level precious weapon, the floating snow spear of 10 directions, he would have been defeated. We can't retreat. Li Ju-ning secretly decided. Since the beginning of the fight, Leng Shiqi had surprised him several times. If he retreated this time, not only would he have a good opportunity to severely injure Leng Shiqi, but he would also be very aggrieved. He, a realm of oneness of heaven and men, was forced to retreat by a realm of gang spirit. He absolutely could not allow this to happen. Anyway, I have the ice silk cold clothes on. Even if I have to resist the crimson gold earth dragon flame, I am not afraid. He thought so, and then the sound of the flute became more intense. The sound that was enough to pierce the eardrum shook the world, and even the air twisted a few times visible to the naked eye. Bang, bang, bang. The waves of spear shadows transformed by Leng Shiqi's golden waves of stormy waves were completely shattered in an instant. Li Ju-ning's sonic spear was a little stronger. If he was really hit by these sonic spears, even if he activated Wild Demon Blood Beast Body and Vajra Unbreakable Force at the same time, it was very likely that he would die here. However, Ling Shiqi had already prepared a backup plan, because as the golden spear shadows swept, crimson ice crystals were left behind. He changed the gesture in his hand, and a gust of cold air diffused from those ice crystals. In the blink of an eye, the cold wind whistled above the sky, and the endless cold force condensed into a piece of hell. It was Crimson Hell. Ling Shiqi didn't expect the Crimson Nether Prison to be able to block Li Ju Ning's sonic spears. What he wanted was for the Crimson Nether Prison's aura to permeate all the sonic spears and make them completely reveal themselves. As expected, the sonic spears were wrapped in Crimson Hell, and all of them were covered with a layer of faint crimson cold air, and this strange cold air also restrained the speed of the sonic spears to a certain extent. Seeing that Crimson Hell was effective, Ling Shiqi used Remnant Wind Thunder Light Steps to quickly retreat. Li Ju Ning immediately shouted, "You want to escape?" Just as he was about to chase, Ling Shiqi waved his hands, and there was a loud rumbling sound. The Crimson Gold Earth Dragon Flame and the Remnant Wind of Nirvana exploded. The extreme flames and the power of Nirvana raged wildly, and the surrounding thousands of feet directly turned into a huge pit dozens of feet deep. Li Ju Ning was also engulfed by the explosion. However, there was a layer of invisible sound barrier around him. Even if the pure gold earth dragon flame touched him, it would be blocked by the ice silk frost armor. Therefore, he was able to traverse through the purgatory. However, what awaited him was colorful flying flowers that filled the sky. In an instant, the flying flowers slowly floated down from the sky, dazzling and dazzling. At this moment, Li Ju Ning's eyes also showed a brief loss of consciousness, but a pendant on his neck shook gently, waking him up again. What an exquisite illusion. It can make me fall into it unknowingly. Fortunately, I prepared something to break the illusion in advance. Otherwise, he might have really escaped. Li Ju Ning was in a daze. Just as he was about to command the sound spear to kill Ling Shiqi, those brilliant flowers suddenly turned into streaks of sword chi. Each petal was a streak of starlight sword chi, and the sword chi layer upon layer covered the sky. From afar, it was clearly a flower that was constantly blooming. All the sword chi in sight began to spin rapidly again, and countless starlight sword chi enveloped Li Ju Ning like a sword prison. This was the dazzling flower that incorporated the level 6 spiritual technique, Sword Fury Wild Flower. Rip. Li Ju Ning drew 5 strings in front of him with his 5 fingers. Then, he continued to play with his 10 fingers. Guqin sounds surged out, and the sound waves spread out with a sharp rhythm. Wherever they went, the void was torn apart, and all the sword chi was cut into nothingness. Moreover, these ripples were extremely fast, and in less than a breath, they arrived at Ling Shiqi's side. Ling Shiqi did not seem to have expected Li Ju Ning's attack to be so powerful and fast. He could not react in time and was hit by the ripples. His wild demon blood beast body and Vajra invincible divine art could not withstand the sound waves, and he was cut in half at the waist by Li Ju Ning. However, Li Ju Ning did not laugh. Instead, he frowned because he felt that Ling Shiqi should not have been killed by him like this. Ever since they fought, Ling Shiqi seemed to be in an absolute disadvantage and could die at any time, but he always had a way to survive, so Li Ju Ning did not think that Ling Shiqi would die like this. Chapter 641. At this moment, 5 multicolored phantoms suddenly appeared and flew in 5 different directions. Li Ju Ning showed an expression of, "I knew it. How dare you use a mere illusion technique in front of me?" Although he couldn't tell which illusion was the real body of Ling Shiqi, for a spirit cultivator like him who cultivated sound wave techniques, he didn't lack large-scale spiritual techniques. He didn't need to know which one was the real body, he could just kill them all. The crimson hell in the sky could no longer stop the sound spear. Li Ju Ning gently waved his hand, and the sound spears were divided into 5 parts. Then, they tore through the air and shot directly at the 5 illusions of Ling Shiqi. 4 of the illusions were instantly obliterated. Li Ju Ning sneered. The last one must be the real body of Ling Shiqi. The sound spear fell and pierced the illusions into a sieve. However, Li Juning frowned. He knew that Leng Shiqi's body was strong. Even if he died, he couldn't be penetrated so easily. The only explanation was that all the illusions were fake. Li Juning suddenly felt like he was being played. What he wanted to know the most now was where the real body of Leng Shiqi was. How did Leng Shiqi sneak away under his nose? Li Juning's perception was fully activated, but he still couldn't find anything. He immediately took out a formation plate. This was the detection formation that Li Juqing gave him. He also used this thing to find the aura of Leng Shiqi flying in the sky in advance, so he had the opportunity to intercept and kill him. But his face suddenly darkened, because even this formation couldn't sense the aura of Leng Shiqi. How could this be? Even if Leng Shiqi was flying in the sky, the formation could sense it. How could it not find him now? He must be nearby. Li Juning said to himself, and there was a hint of disbelief in his eyes. In fact, Leng Shiqi was deep underground at this moment. He had replicated the method he used when he was hunted down by the gang spirit realm experts of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect on the South Divine Peak. He used the lustful flowers as a feint to attack, while he used the hand of earth to sneak into the ground. Leng Shiqi had not used the hand of the earth for a long time. Now, he felt an indescribable smoothness when he used it. He was like a fish in water, or a dragon in the sea. His speed was extremely fast. He didn't care too much about it. Perhaps this was the effect of his high cultivation. He frantically dived underground, and at the same time, pulled away from Li Juning. The reason why he was not detected by Li Juning was that there was a little bug on his shoulder, which was the Gu King. Now, Gu King was also seriously injured. The wings on his back were all broken, and there was blood flowing out. Fortunately, Gu King's concealment ability was still there, helping Leng Shiqi to conceal his aura. There was no way Li Ju would let Leng Shiqi escape. He took out a drum as tall as a man from his mustard seed bracelet, clenched his fist, and punched the drum. Boom! It was like a sudden clap of thunder on the ground. Even people dozens of miles away could hear it clearly. With Li Juning as the center, the world around him shook. A strange rhythm surged, and the surrounding space began to distort slightly. Li Juning closed his eyes. At this time, all the places where the sound wave passed through were within his range of perception. What was different from before was that this time, the range of his perception also included the sky and the ground. After 2 breaths, Li Juning suddenly opened his eyes, and a trace of contempt flashed in his eyes. He shouted in a low voice, "So you're hiding underground? You still want to run? Come out." Boom! He struck the surface of the drum with his fist, and all the force struck the ground. Immediately, the ground within a radius of several kilometers started to shake like the surface of a lake, and waves of powerful force shattered everything beneath the ground. Leng Shiqi, who was escaping, felt a strong force coming towards him. He was shocked. Li Juning had discovered him. Helplessly, he was forced to return to the ground to avoid this attack. However, this also meant that his escape had failed. Seeing Leng Shiqi break out of the ground, Li Juning punched with both fists. Waves of sound waves attacked. It was as if the entire world was filled with the sound waves. There was no way to avoid it. Leng Shiqi secretly took a deep breath. He clenched his fists, and the left and right sides of his body shone with black and white light and soared into the sky. The black and white light intertwined. With a dragon's roar, a yin-yang dragon that was nearly 300 feet long appeared in the sky above. Moreover, the dragon horns of this yin-yang dragon were dark gold in color. A dragon's aura spread out, and it seemed to give the yin-yang dragon a trace of life. Floating dragon, Taishu. Li Juning's expression also became serious. Leng Shiqi's information also recorded this move. This was also his strongest move. As long as he broke through Floating Dragon, Taishu, Leng Shiqi would no longer be able to resist. As soon as the roaming dragon appeared, all the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the surroundings instantly became chaotic. The heaven and earth spiritual energy that Li Juning, who was in the unity of heaven and man realm, was most proud of was suppressed to the extreme. The sound waves that were just like the end of the world dissipated on their own. However, Li Juning's expression was still the same. He took off a ring on his finger and crushed it. A blurry figure appeared behind him. The figure suddenly turned into wisps of gas that intertwined with each other. Finally, it condensed into a protective spirit shield around Li Juning. This kind of spirit shield looked very ordinary. Even a low-level spirit cultivator in the spirit transformation realm could do it. However, Li Juning knew that this was a protective spirit shield left behind by his Li family's ancestor. It could completely withstand the full-force attack of a mid-stage Unity Realm cultivator. In order to kill Ling Shiqi, he had spent a lot of money. The floating dragon soared through the sky. It suddenly opened its big mouth and swooped down. Wherever the floating dragon went, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was destroyed. The 5 elements were reversed and yin and yang were reversed. This force that was enough to change the color of heaven and earth blasted on Li Juning's protective spirit shield. In an instant, a dazzling light shone for hundreds of miles. However, no sound came out. It was as if even the sound of the battle was swallowed up. When the light dissipated, with Li Juning as the center, the ground within a radius of tens of thousands of feet had sunk more than 100 feet deep. It was really barren. However, Li Juning was still standing in the same place safely, without any damage. However, his face was much paler than before because the protective spirit shield around his body was on the verge of collapse. This was the protective means left by the Li family's ancestor. Under the attack of Ling Shiqi, who was in the middle stage of Gang's spirit realm, it was almost broken. Didn't this mean that Ling Shiqi now had the strength to kill a spirit cultivator in the Unity realm alone? If Ling Shiqi broke through to the Unity realm, who in the Li family could kill him? No, by that time, they should be worried about whether Ling Shiqi would kill them. A person with such terrible potential must not be allowed to live. Chapter 642. Li Juning swore to kill Ling Shiqi, but Ling Shiqi was also unforgiving. It was within his expectation that Yulong Taishu could not kill Li Juning. The long-lost blood-stained star devil saber was unsheathed. Suddenly, the devil chi rose and the evil spirit soared to the sky, including some ghost chi. The blood-stained star devil saber trembled in Ling Shiqi's hand and made an excited buzzing sound. Ling Shiqi could clearly feel the excitement of the spirit. It was the first time since he got the blood-stained star devil saber. During this time, he had been nurturing the saber, which made the spirit suffocate. In Li Juning's eyes, he did not expect that Ling Shiqi would have such a horrible evil spirit. He could not imagine how many lives Ling Shiqi had killed. In fact, Li Juning still misunderstood Ling Shiqi. Although Ling Shiqi had killed a lot of people along the way, he had not condensed such a substantial evil spirit. It was mainly because of his passive skill of Hell Curse, which would absorb a certain degree of evil spirit while absorbing the remnant souls. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been bitten by the evil spirit and become a killing madman. Sooner or later, he would be besieged by many spirit cultivators. But Ling Shiqi himself practiced the 7 evil blood-killing formula and could use the evil spirit for himself. Moreover, Ling Shiqi's spiritual force was so strong that he had already condensed a spirit. In addition, he had the red gold earth dragon flame and Buddhist cultivation method, so it was easy for him to suppress the evil spirit. The violent devilish energy churned endlessly. Ling Shiqi stood with his saber in front of him. The surging devilish energy formed a phantom of a demon god holding a devil saber. Ling Shiqi chopped down, and the demon god's shadow behind him also chopped down. Suddenly, a saber light appeared, as if it could cut everything. Devil ephemeral bloom. Li Juning never thought that he would be in a passive situation, but he did not believe that Ling Shiqi could use powerful spiritual force one after another with the cultivation of the middle stage of Gang's spirit realm. Therefore, he decided to be safe and wait for the attack. As long as Ling Shiqi's spiritual force was depleted, he could only be slaughtered. He took out the big drum again, and sound waves gathered around him to form an invisible sound barrier. Buzz. Before the evil spirit's blade's strength sound, the blade was constantly shaken by the sound barrier. It had signs of collapse at the edge. Ling Shiqi's strength's blade sound, but with a loud ding, the demon blade was blades that heaven's blade was bounced off. Ling Shiqi's eyes narrowed slightly. Li Juning's invisible sound barrier had the same effect as the earth pulse, which made the devil's ephemeral bloom that he had accumulated almost no effect. The reason why he did not use the ephemeral bloom was that he knew that Li Juning had a treasure that could block illusions, so the effect of the ephemeral bloom would be greatly reduced. But the devil's ephemeral bloom could not hurt Li Juning at all. Ha ha ha. Li Juning sneered. Seeing that Ling Shiqi was obviously exhausted, he said, "The stronger your attack, the stronger my sound barrier will be." Well, you have no spiritual force, right? Let's see if you can survive this time. Li Juning was about to kill Ling Shiqi, but he did not know that Ling Shiqi was also pondering over Li Juning's words. Suddenly, he had an idea. Ling Shiqi's blade force changed, and the evil spirit and devil qi around him suddenly disappeared. The originally ferocious and violent blade force became extremely slow. At the same time, Ling Shiqi's light of Buddha shone brightly behind him, and he slashed down. There was no killing intent in the blade intent, but it contained endless power to save the world. This was the merciful blade technique that Tu Dang had passed on to him. The blade slashes Bodhi, exterminates evil, and saves the world. Buddha, ephemeral bloom. Buddha's light of all living beings. The strange blade light fell, ignoring Li Juning's sound barrier, and directly slashed his body under Li Juning's shocked gaze. Your sound barrier can block most attacks, and the stronger the attack, the more likely you will be shocked. But Buddha ephemeral bloom has no killing intent. It does not want to kill you, but to save you. The merciful light of Buddha's light of purification enveloped Li Juning. As he was in the oneness of heaven and men realm, his path of cultivation was also stained with a lot of blood and karma. Under the influence of the power to save the world, a layer of karma fire suddenly ignited all over his body. Li Juning suddenly felt as if he had fallen into an endless hell, and there were bursts of sharp pain all over his body. The terrible thing was that this pain did not come directly from his body, but from his heart, from his soul. Even his soul was starting to burn. Li Juning hugged his head and wailed. His body and soul were being punished by karma, but his eyes became more and more fierce. His eyes had turned blood red, and there was only endless killing intent in them. Even if he was tortured, he had to kill Ling Shiqi first. Ling Shiqi had used the Great Void Swimming Dragon and the 2 ephemeral bloom moves in succession. Now, he had less than 20% of his spiritual power left, and the qi, blood, and mental power in his body had been greatly consumed. If Li Juning attacked again, he might really die here. At this point, his only chance was the secret method recorded in the Heavenly Star Technique, the Falling Star Technique. The Falling Star Technique could allow Ling Shiqi to burst out superpower in a short time, but the price was that he would lose the most advanced star of chaos forever. Judging from his current cultivation at the 4th level of Gang's spirit realm, it meant that he had to sacrifice his current cultivation and drop to the 3rd level of Gang's spirit realm. This was not just a level difference, but a huge gap between the middle stage of Gang's spirit realm and the early stage of Gang's spirit realm. Cultivation was not easy, and who would want to lose his cultivation? But cultivation was not so important in the face of life and death. As long as he was alive, he could still cultivate his cultivation back after some time. But if he lost his life, how could he talk about cultivation? In Ling Shiqi's spiritual star C, his mental power had locked on a 4th-order star, and he was ready to use the falling star technique at any time. At this time, Li Juning's whole body was blooming with blood. In order to resist the burning of the hellfire, he had to start burning his essence and blood. Then, he pointed out a finger, and the spiritual power between heaven and earth immediately gathered crazily. The finger seemed to directly break the space, and a very thin thread in the air quickly shot toward Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi had begun to prepare to use the falling star technique, but at this time, he suddenly remembered something. Immediately, he showed a panicked look. He seemed to want to struggle and escape, but his speed was far slower than that of the black thread. The black thread streaked across, and Leng Shiqi's legs below his waist continued to run forward, but his upper body had already fallen to the ground. Leng Shiqi, dead. Chapter 643. Puff. Li Juning could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Looking at the body of Leng Shiqi that had been cut in half, he was still a little worried. He endured his injury and once again sensed the breath of Leng Shiqi. When he confirmed that the breath of Leng Shiqi had completely dissipated, he was secretly relieved. He finally killed him. Before Li Juning intercepted and killed Leng Shiqi, he had never expected that it would be so difficult to kill a man in the middle stage of Gang's spirit realm. He had prepared the ice thread cold clothes and treasures that could ignore illusions. In this case, he even used his life-saving trump card to barely kill Leng Shiqi. He had thought that he could finish the battle with just a few moves, but he was forced to burn his essence and blood and use his trump card, which caused him serious internal injuries. He could not imagine how he could kill Leng Shiqi if he did not have the ice thread cold clothes and the spiritual weapon that could resist illusions. Li Juning thought about it carefully and realized that he might not be able to do it. Fortunately, I am well prepared this time. No wonder Li Jueqing values him so much. Even a lion will do its best to catch a rabbit. I can't underestimate any opponent in the future. Ahem. Li Juning reminded himself, but he suddenly coughed violently again. Because he was still entangled by the hellfire at the moment. If he was in his heyday, he could suppress it, but now his battle strength was greatly reduced. He could only take a few elixirs and adjust his breath on the spot, trying to get rid of the hellfire. But suddenly, a figure appeared behind him. Who is it? Li Juning noticed in an instant. He turned around abruptly and saw a man with hundreds of starlight gems all over his body. This man was Leng Shiqi. Lu Xingji. You, how can you still be alive? Li Juning was immediately shocked. He had just confirmed that Leng Shiqi's breath had completely disappeared, and even his body had been cut in half. How could he not be dead? Li Juning glanced to the side. The two halves of the Leng Shiqi's corpse had disappeared. Now, there was only a straw doll lying there. This was the substitute doll that Leng Shiqi had bought from the system shop. It could help him block a fatal attack. Leng Shiqi had used the substitute doll to save his life. However, he did not run away this time because he realized that the substitute doll did not simply block the attack. Instead, it changed time when he was about to die. To be more precise, he had reversed Leng Shiqi's time a little bit, which happened to be the state before he used the two ephemeral blossoms. At this time, Leng Shiqi still had half of the spiritual power in his body. His qi, blood, and spiritual power were also relatively sufficient. Especially when Leng Shiqi saw that Li Juning had also suffered heavy internal injuries and was surrounded by hellfire. Was this not the best opportunity to kill Li Juning? Li Juning did not have time to be shocked. He could see the cold killing intent in Leng Shiqi's eyes. He knew that only one person could survive today. Although I don't know what method you used to escape with your life, since I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Li Juning said viciously, but Leng Shiqi ignored him. Only then did Li Juning notice that Leng Shiqi's eyes had turned gold and silver. In addition to the killing intent, there was also indifference. He looked at Li Juning as if he was looking at a stone on the side of the road. Leng Shiqi had used the substitute doll to escape, but he had indeed experienced life and death once. The horror of death was still imprinted in his heart. As the saying goes, there can be no construction without destruction. He, who had been reborn by going back in time, had also entered an extremely mysterious state. Leng Shiqi opened his arms. The 360 spiritual cavities in his body became brighter and brighter, including the mysterious star atlas carved on his body, began to flicker. Immediately after, starlight flowed around his body, and streams of light shot out. In an instant, the sky darkened, and the bright sun in the sky suddenly turned into a starry sky. At the same time, Star Atlas flew out from Leng Shiqi's body. The galaxy flowed, the nebula changed, and the space suddenly became a starry universe. Heavenly cosmic star gang. Li Juning looked at all this in a daze. As a master in the realm of oneness of heaven and men, he should not be in this state. But at this time, he could not feel any trace of spiritual power of heaven and earth, as if he was no longer in the original world. How could this not shock him to the core? The most powerful thing about the realm of oneness of heaven and men was that he could use the spiritual power of heaven and earth. Now, he had completely lost this reliance and was injured. Now, he could only exert the combat strength of the late stage of Gang's spirit realm at most. This kind of combat strength was rare in normal times. But if he wanted to kill Leng Shiqi again with this kind of combat strength, Li Juning himself was not sure. Leng Shiqi's gold and silver eyes flashed a trace of khaki color. Suddenly, the stars in the whole starry sky turned khaki, as if there were countless Saturn stars. Then, a burst of strange energy sprinkled down, which contained both gravity and anti-gravity at the same time. Leng Shiqi tapped his foot lightly, and his body slowly floated up. He stood in mid-air and looked down at Li Juning. With a thought, the stars in the sky flickered continuously, and an extremely powerful gravity suddenly appeared. Even the earth seemed to be wailing. Li Juning was pressed down by the infinite gravity and was instantly pressed to the ground. Now he could not move at all. He could not even blink his eyes. All the blood in his body was stagnant, and his bones were on the verge of collapse at any time. If it went on like this, it would not be long before he was smashed to pieces. Li Juning finally began to be afraid. He had already felt the breath of death. He was horrified and said, What is this? He could not understand. If Leng Shiqi had such a means, why didn't he use it at the beginning? Why did he wait until now? In fact, Leng Shiqi did it at will. He did not know that he had such an ability. Of course, Li Juning could not just wait for death. He opened his mouth with difficulty and gently spat out a syllable. Ho! Immediately, a faint sound wave spread out. It seemed very inconspicuous, but wherever the sound wave spread, all the gravity returned to heaven and earth and no longer existed. This was a secret method that Li Juning had obtained from ancient times. It was said that when practiced to the great perfection realm, everything in the world would return to its original state. He had only learned a little bit after practicing for more than 10 years, but this little bit of knowledge had become his biggest trump card and killing weapon. However, the price of this move was also very high. Li Juning's body was aging at a speed visible to the naked eye. This secret method was overdrawing his life. The sound wave spread out, and a small field was propped up in Leng Shiqi's heavenly star atlas. Li Juning broke free from the gravity and was about to escape. Yes, he was a grandmaster at the oneness of heaven and men realm. He had come to kill Leng Shiqi, but now he wanted to escape. Because he did not want to die. However, how could Leng Shiqi let him go? Leng Shiqi put his palms together, and the heavenly star atlas suddenly burst out with boundless holy light. Huge Buddhist lotuses suddenly appeared, and at the same time, countless stars in the heavenly star atlas gathered in an instant. Wrapped in the Buddhist light, they formed a giant palm shadow that covered the sky. The Buddha's palm. The palm shadow slowly fell, and every inch it fell seemed to make heaven and earth tremble slightly. Li Juning was frightened, but he did not dare to stop. Even though he knew that his chances of escaping were not high, he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. At this moment, a yellow light flashed, and under the extreme pressure of gravity, it was as if the palm shadow was pushed from behind. The Buddha's palm instantly smashed down. What ancient secret arts! What strange sound waves! They were all destroyed like paper under the Buddha's palm. The Buddha's palm destroyed all of Li Juning's means. When it fell, gods and demons would retreat, and Buddha would be boundless. The shocking Buddhist light shone for thousands of miles. When the Buddhist light dissipated, only a palm print with a radius of several miles was left on the ground. Other than that, there was nothing else. I'm afraid that this place will be barren for the next few hundred years. To be able to do this, one has to be at least at the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. But where did a late-stage heaven-man unity realm expert pop out from? Where are Li Juning and Lu Xingji? Fourth uncle's cultivation was at the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. His words were very convincing. Li Gu, who was standing opposite him, was also puzzled. We sensed Li Juning's aura not long ago, and there were also violent fluctuations of spiritual power. This means that they were still fighting. Even if someone died, they shouldn't have disappeared. This is too unexpected. Could it be that when Li Juning intercepted Lu Xingji, he was detected by the experts at the border? Fourth uncle's heart was very heavy. Now that Li Juning had inexplicably disappeared, was Leng Shiqi dead or not? No one knew. Li Gu asked, "Fourth uncle, what should we do now?" He didn't have a clue either. The three of them had split up and used the array formation to monitor a huge area in order to assassinate Leng Shiqi. It seemed that Li Juning had met Leng Shiqi. In the minds of Li Juning and Li Gu, Li Juning could easily kill Leng Shiqi. Even if Leng Shiqi was not weak, it was impossible for him to escape from Li Juning's hands, because Li Juning's cultivation method and spiritual skills were very special. Although his cultivation was at the early stage of the unity of heaven and man realm, his real combat power was definitely comparable to the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, Li Juning also had various treasures that could restrain Leng Shiqi's heavenly fire and illusion, and the life-saving means left by the Li family's ancestor. Therefore, they did not think that Li Juning would die in the hands of a spirit cultivator at the middle stage of the gang's spirit realm. In this way, they were a little confused. Fourth uncle pondered for a moment and said, "Since we have decided to kill Lu Xingji, he must die, otherwise there will be endless hidden dangers in the future. Let's not worry about Li Juning. I don't think he will die so easily. Maybe he is in trouble and temporarily hides. Now let's split up to look for Lu Xingji. We must not let him return to the Western Wilderness Prefecture." Okay. Li Gu nodded heavily. The two immediately separated and used the formation to continue to look for Leng Shiqi. They would never dream that the reason why Li Juning's aura disappeared was because of the Heavenly Star Gang, the Buddha's palm, and that mysterious power. Everything about Li Juning was wiped out. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was still desperately running away. However, his speed was gradually slowing down. Looking carefully, his gold and silver eyes slowly began to return to normal, and that strange power was also fading. Not long after, he withdrew from that miraculous state. Only then did he find that there was something sticky on his face. When he touched it, he found that it was sticky blood. It turned out that unconsciously, Leng Shiqi was bleeding from his 7 orifices. At this moment, he suddenly felt as if a bomb had been thrown into his brain. The inhuman pain stimulated his brain and almost made him faint. The primordial spirit in the spiritual sea was also dispirited and was almost on the verge of collapse. His spiritual power was like a river that had been drained for decades, dried up to an unimaginable extent. Leng Shiqi, who was deep in the ground, suddenly stopped. He held his head and his whole body trembled in pain, but he resisted the urge to make a sound. He directly took out a large variety of elixirs from his mustard bracelet and swallowed them all. This pain lasted for 2 to 4 hours before it began to gradually subside. Leng Shiqi was in so much pain that he was sweating profusely and his face was weak. He suddenly recalled that he seemed to have experienced such a situation once before, and it was when he killed the Li brothers in the heavenly tomb. At that time, he also used a mysterious power to kill the Li brothers with a flip of his hand. After that, his spiritual power was also exhausted. But this time, it was much more serious than that time. So, what was that power? Leng Shiqi endured the pain in his head and thought carefully. His eyes flashed, and he suddenly remembered what the shadows in the heavenly tomb had said. 4 words appeared in his mind. The power of law. Chapter 645. The power of law was magical and mysterious. He had touched it by chance in the tomb of heaven, but he had only heard a few words about it. The way he killed Li Juning was similar to the way he killed the Li brothers. And Ling Shiqi found that the two methods seemed to have something to do with Earth. To be more precise, it had something to do with gravity. In the tomb of heaven, he had used gravity similar to a black hole, which absorbed and crushed everything. Not long ago, he had formed a gravity space, in which he could control gravity and anti-gravity at will. Even Li Juning, who was in the realm of oneness of heaven and men, could not move. If what he guessed was true, how could he use the power of the law of heaven and earth in the gang spirit realm? He clearly remembered that those Tianyuan realm experts in the tomb of heaven were still groping and trying to comprehend the power of the law of heaven and earth, but they could not get it. How could Ling Shiqi, who was in the gang spirit realm, do something that even Tianyuan realm experts could not do? This was also what confused Ling Shiqi the most. He wanted to try again, but unfortunately, he had now withdrawn from that mysterious state. It was like he clearly felt that he was holding something in his hand, but when he looked down, there was nothing. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. Of course, he had no time to explore now. Although he slowed down a lot, he still had to desperately swim underground, for fear of being caught by the other two oneness of heaven and men of the Li family. Ling Shiqi dragged his seriously injured body and kept moving forward. All the strength in his body was almost exhausted. He was basically supporting himself with a strong will. He did not know how long he had been in a daze. Just as his vision became more and more blurred and he was about to faint, he suddenly saw a system prompt. Mansion of the Dead has been upgraded successfully. When Ling Shiqi saw this message, it was as if he had seen a life-saving straw. He used the last of his consciousness to transmit himself into the Mansion of the Dead. As soon as he entered the Mansion of the Dead, Ling Shiqi did not even have time to see the changes of the Mansion of the Dead after the upgrade. He fell to the ground and fainted. His battle with Li Juning had overdrawn too much of his strength, and he had inadvertently triggered the power of the laws of heaven and earth that he was not supposed to master. Coupled with the fact that he had been running for a long time, even if his willpower was strong, he could not hold on any longer. This was especially so when he knew that entering the underworld was equivalent to saving his life. Once he relaxed his mind, all the pain and burden that he had been suppressing would explode out, causing him to faint. However, Ling Shiqi did not know that after he lost consciousness, a thick cloud of pure black gas suddenly appeared and wrapped around him. From afar, it looked like a sticky cocoon. Wisps of mysterious energy entered his body and rapidly healed his injuries. About a day later, Ling Shiqi suddenly opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the black energy surrounding him. He was startled at first, but he also found that his injuries had unknowingly healed by more than half. His primordial spirit and spiritual energy had recovered by 60 to 70%. Even his blood essence had been replenished by quite a bit. What is this? Its healing effect is actually so good? Ling Shiqi was puzzled. Originally, in his initial plan, it would take at least 1 or 2 months for him to recover from his injuries. And this was only healing. If he wanted to return to his peak state, it would probably take about 3 months. He had been prepared to recuperate for a long time, but after he woke up from his sleep, he was almost healed. This made him feel pleasantly surprised and a little incredulous. He could not help but think to himself, is this the benefit of the underworld's upgrade? Thinking of this, the black gas around him slowly disappeared. He could finally see the underworld's current appearance. However, Ling Shiqi looked around and suddenly showed a surprised expression. After the underworld's upgrade, it had expanded a lot. Ling Shiqi thought that this upgrade would be the same. In fact, as he expected, he could no longer see the end of the underworld. The radius of the underworld was probably more than hundreds of miles. If it was just the expansion of the underworld, of course, Ling Shiqi would not show such an expression. The main reason was that the underworld was no longer a flat surface. At this moment, he was in front of the underworld's gate. The underworld's gate was dozens of feet tall, like a huge towering wall. There were countless bones on the wall, which was extremely terrifying. Looking back, the road to the underworld meandered for an unknown distance, as if it was leading to an abyss. And the river of forgetfulness was hanging upside down, like a river hanging in the 9 heavens. The bridge of helplessness was hidden in a large cloud of gray fog. It was blurry, mysterious, and faintly discernible. Then, a mountain range appeared behind him. The mountain range was rugged and was completely shrouded in layers of black wind. Ghosts were everywhere, and ghosts were howling. At the top of the mountain range, there was a pure black hall. The Hall of Enchantment. The thousands of souls that Ling Shiqi had absorbed not long ago were walking on the road to the underworld. The first batch of souls had already climbed up the mountain range and were walking toward the Hall of Enchantment at the highest point. Ling Shiqi looked at all this in a trance. He murmured, "No wonder it took a day for the underworld to upgrade this time. The changes are really great." These were just the superficial changes of the underworld. Ling Shiqi also found that the system of his territory had also changed. First of all, the number of ghost slaves had changed from 2 to 4, and with the upgrade of the underworld, the strength and ability of the ghost slaves would also be improved. Ling Shiqi immediately called Li Gui over. At a glance, he found that Li Gui's ghost chi was really stronger, and his eyes were more flexible. The aura he exuded was comparable to that of the Gang Spirit Realm. Ling Shiqi was very satisfied that he had one more Gang Spirit Realm expert with strange abilities. Especially now that the Gu King was also injured and could not provide him with an increase in strength, Li Gui made up for it. Thinking that there were still 3 ghost slaves, Ling Shiqi moved his divine thoughts and quickly found Li Juning's soul among the many souls. Seeing Li Juning's muddled soul, Ling Shiqi's expression turned cold. He directly turned Li Juning into a ghost slave. Li Juning immediately knelt on the ground, his head almost buried in the ground. He said, "Master." Seeing Li Juning, who almost killed him, kneeling in front of him, Ling Shiqi could not help but feel a little happy. At the same time, he secretly reminded himself that he could not be careless at all times. He thought that with his strength, he was invincible in the Gang Spirit Realm, but there were still too many people in the world who could kill him. As the saying goes, there is always someone better than you. Unless he was standing at the top of the world, he had to keep a vigilant mind at all times. This time, he didn't know who had leaked his whereabouts, but he had to find out who it was. Moreover, he did not know why Li Juning could find him. At that time, he was flying in the sky, but he was still found. Therefore, all information regarding his combat prowess had long been thoroughly investigated. Fortunately, he had obtained a Buddhist cultivation technique from Tudong. Furthermore, the prizes that he had drawn from the system were still somewhat secretive. The most important point was that this time, if it were not for the substitute doll, he would have been dead. Originally, Ling Shiqi thought that with the wild evil demon blood beast body, the Vajra unbreakable divine skill, and the secret protection of the granite shield, there was almost no one who could break his defense. But in front of a spirit cultivator in the oneness of heaven and men realm, it was still a little weak, so he still had to prepare some life-saving means and trump cards. Chapter 646. Ling Shiqi retracted his thoughts. He noticed that Li Juning had the power of the spirit aperture realm after being turned into a ghost slave. He was more powerful than Li Gui. Perhaps this was the benefit of the underworld's upgrade. Ling Shiqi thought about it. It wasn't appropriate to call this ghost slave Li Juning anymore. Since you were proficient in the musical assassination technique, you shall be called the Sound Ghost. Thank you for the name, Master, the Sound Ghost said. His intelligence was higher than Li Gui's when he was born. Ling Shiqi sent Li Gui and the Sound Ghost away. He looked at the peak of the underworld. There was a huge palace at the peak of the mountain called the Lost Soul Palace. All the dead who came to the underworld would be judged there. Based on the sins they had committed and the merits they had accumulated, they would be decided which of the 6 realms of reincarnation they would enter in their next life. As Ling Shiqi thought about it, his figure instantly appeared in front of the Lost Soul Palace's entrance. This was a function of the underworld's upgrade, teleportation. As the master of the underworld, he could move freely in the underworld. No matter how far he was, he could arrive directly. This was his privilege as the master of the underworld. Ling Shiqi stood in front of the Lost Soul Palace. At this moment, there were already scattered souls that had arrived, but they all stopped at the entrance. He estimated that he would have to wait for the next upgrade of the underworld before he could open the Lost Soul Palace's entrance and let these souls in. Ling Shiqi was very curious about what would happen to the souls after they went through the Lost Soul Palace. Since he thought about the underworld's upgrade, he immediately went to the nearby Fengdu city. The Fengdu city's entrance was still closed. Ling Shiqi walked forward and immediately saw the conditions for the underworld's next upgrade. Underworld Territories Current Level, Tier 3. Conditions for Underworld Territories Upgrade 1. Recruit 3 members of the Underworld, 0/3. 2. Collect 2 high-level souls, 0/2. 3. 40,000 system coins. Seeing these 3 conditions, Ling Shiqi wasn't too surprised about the first and third conditions. He needed to continue recruiting members, and Ling Shiqi already had a preliminary candidate in mind. As for the system coins, that was within his expectations. After all, he had a lot of resources now, so he could still afford it. What surprised Ling Shiqi was the second condition. In the past, he had only allowed him to absorb some souls, but this time, he was absorbing high-grade souls. Then what was a high-grade soul? In the past, Underworld's upgrade would require thousands or even thousands of souls. However, this time, there were only 2. Just from this number alone, one could tell that high-level souls were not simple. Ling Shiqi suddenly thought of Li Gui and Sound Ghost. Could it be that only the soul of a spirit cultivator can be considered a high-level soul? If that was really the case, then it would give him a headache. Up until now, even though he'd killed 2 great experts at the unity of heaven and man realm, it was extremely difficult every time, and he'd almost lost his life. If he were to wait until he could kill a unity of heaven realm expert head-on, he would still have a long way to go. However, it wasn't completely impossible. After the battle with Li Juning, Ling Shiqi's spiritual power cultivation had improved, and he could use all his spiritual techniques more smoothly. In particular, the power and characteristics of the heavenly cycle star god shield made Ling Shiqi very satisfied. The self-proclaimed ability to isolate the spiritual power of heaven and earth could be said to be the nemesis of the unity of heaven and man realm. The most powerful aspect of the unity of heaven and man realm was the ability to mobilize the spiritual power of heaven and earth. The heavenly cycle star god shield could directly isolate the spiritual power of heaven and earth from the outside world, so the unity of heaven and man realm could only have the advantage of having more profound spiritual power in front of him. However, the problem was that the heavenly cycle star god shield was unique to the star race. If Ling Shiqi could kill his opponent, then it would be fine. However, if he used the heavenly cycle star god shield and failed to kill his opponent and was recognized, then he would be in trouble. Therefore, not only did he need a trump card to save his life, but he also needed a trump card to kill his enemy. When he thought of this, he suddenly remembered that he had used a challenge card before. The mission was to kill a spirit cultivator at the unity of heaven and man realm. Killing Li Juning should be considered as completing the mission of the challenge card. The reward for completing the mission was a chance to draw a top prize. He opened the system's lottery interface, and there was a top prize option. Ling Shiqi had also drawn top prizes in the infinite lottery in the past. For example, the Fate skill was a top prize, and it was also a means for him to travel thousands of miles in a day. Therefore, he was looking forward to this top prize. Ling Shiqi pressed the lottery button. A light flashed, and a very strange sword appeared in front of him. The reason why this sword was strange was because in front of Ling Shiqi, there was only a glaring sword shadow, and it did not have a physical body. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the top prize, Divine Sword Bright, consumable. Divine Sword Bright? Ling Shiqi looked at the name of the sword and began to search his memory. This sword seemed to come from a game world called Ancient Sword, in his previous life. It was said that when this sword was forged, the 3 realms shook, and it was dazzling, hence the name. Ling Shiqi recalled the information about the Divine Sword Bright, and his eyes couldn't help but shrink a few times. If he remembered correctly, the divine sword Bright's biggest characteristic was to cut off all spiritual power connections in the world. One had to know that in this world, whether it was a spirit caster or a spirit cultivator, the spirit skills used were based on spiritual power. If he mastered the divine sword Bright, then wouldn't everyone be the same as an ordinary person in front of him? There were also the top sects, the three great dynasties, and the hidden families. All of them had large and small formations protecting them. As long as Leng Shiqi held this sword, he could easily break all the formations and barriers. Regardless of whether it was a battle between spirit cultivator or an attack on a sect, this was a genuine divine artifact. Perhaps this sword also contained some kind of powerful law of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, the divine sword Bright he drew was only a consumable item, which meant that it could only be used once. However, Leng Shiqi was not greedy. According to the system's rating, the divine sword Bright would definitely be classified as a god-level prize. And this time, his lottery draw was a top-notch one. Being able to draw a one-time use divine sword Bright was already a huge profit. Leng Shiqi held the sword's shadow, and the sword's shadow immediately sank into his arm. He lifted his sleeve and saw that there was an additional sword imprint on his wrist. As long as he activated it, he would be able to activate the divine sword Bright. Leng Shiqi wore the mustard seed bracelet on his wrist to cover the imprint, and then continued to cultivate and recuperate. After all, his injuries could not be healed in a day or two. As such, he stayed in the underworld for more than 10 days until he recovered 80 to 90% of his strength. Leng Shiqi opened his eyes, and a few rays of cold light flashed in them. It's time to find the person who leaked my whereabouts. Chapter 647. There were very few people who knew that Leng Shiqi had gone to the Western Desolate Province. He remembered that there were only 7 people present at the time. They were Inspector Yu Ruifeng, his right-hand man Li Hong, Duan Chun, and the other 2 inspectors. Apart from them were Lian Yi and Gao Yi. Among these people, Leng Shiqi eliminated Lian Yi and Yu Ruifeng. There was no need to mention Lian Yi. The enmity between her and Leng Shiqi had long been resolved. Moreover, Leng Shiqi had brought Lian Yi here under Heavenly Sovereign Black Flame's orders. If Heavenly Sovereign Black Flame had killed him first, he wouldn't have needed to spend so much effort. As for Yu Ruifeng, he had no motive. He was Eunuch Gao's man and was on the opposite side of Li Jueqing. It was almost impossible for Li Jueqing to instigate an inspector. Moreover, Leng Shiqi had saved his life. He had also wanted to pass his position to Leng Shiqi. Most importantly, there was no benefit for him to kill Leng Shiqi, so he eliminated him first. Then, only Gao Yi and Duan Chun were left. Among these people, the most suspicious ones were Gao Yi and Duan Chun. Gao Yi was Eunuch Gao's favorite adopted son, and Leng Shiqi was Eunuch Gao's personal disciple, as well as his favorite person. Although Leng Shiqi and Gao Yi had only met a few times and didn't seem to have any interactions, they couldn't compare to one conflict. That was, who would take over Eunuch Gao's position. Seeing that the Thunderflame dynasty was about to have a change in power, Eunuch Gao's position as one of the 4 great supervisors was most likely going to be removed. So, who would take over? At present, other than the deputy supervisors, only Leng Shiqi and Gao Yi had the most hope. Therefore, in Leng Shiqi's opinion, Gao Yi had a motive to kill him. Moreover, they had fought in Xingji Pavilion before, so their relationship was not good. In addition, Duan Chun might have been secretly bribed by Li Jueqing. This Duan Chun was once Leng Shiqi's superior, but because he was jealous of Leng Shiqi's windfall, he secretly caused trouble for him. Later, Leng Shiqi directly replaced Duan Chunbei County's great supervisor position without giving him any face. Duan Chun might hold a grudge because of this, so he secretly sided with Li Jueqing and sold information about the Leng Shiqi. Of course, this was just Leng Shiqi's guess. He didn't have much interaction with the other people, so Gao Yi and Duan Chun were the most likely. Half a month later, Dark Thunder Manor in West Desolation City. There were very few people here because most of the Dark Thunder guards had been sent out to scout for information. Only Yu Ruifeng and a few others were in the center to control the situation. Especially now that Zhu Lu country, Bei Lu country, and Du country's diplomatic missions had entered West Desolation City. Zhu Lu country had been staying in the West Desolation City's inn for a few days. There was a huge hole in the chest of the corpse, as if some kind of power had pierced through the heart and killed him. What made Lian Ye's heart jump was that the owner of the corpse was eunuch Gao's adopted son, Gao Yi. Gao Yi was killed? And he was killed in one hit? Gao Yi was an expert at the late stage of the spirit astral realm. How could he be killed in one hit? Could it be that the person who did it was an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm? At this moment, Yu Ruifeng was standing beside Gao Yi's corpse with a gloomy face. Just now, he suddenly felt an extremely powerful spirit energy appear in the Dark Thunder Manor. He immediately felt that something was wrong and rushed over as fast as he could. However, he was still one step too late. He didn't even see the person who did it. He only saw that person emitted a dazzling golden light and disappeared in a red, blue, and yellow light. Gao Yi was eunuch Gao's favorite adopted son. He also held an important position in the palace. Now that he had died in the Western Baron County, and in the Dark Thunder Manor at that, Yu Ruifeng, the supervisor, could not escape the blame. While Yu Ruifeng hated Gao Yi, he couldn't help but be surprised by the killer's strength. Although he only saw the person's figure, he could tell that the person was definitely at the spirit astral realm. But Gao Yi was also at the spirit astral realm, the peak of the spirit astral realm. Gao Yi also practiced the cold magic book created by eunuch Gao. His strength was definitely not weak. How could he be killed before he even had time to react? The killer's strength was so strong. Lord Yu, what happened? Lian Yi asked in a trembling voice. Someone dared to kill Gao Yi in the Dark Thunder Manor under Yu Ruifeng's nose. That person was really bold and powerful. Yu Ruifeng was about to speak, but there was another commotion outside the Dark Thunder Manor. He frowned. Soon, a Dark Thunder guard hurried in and shouted, Lord Yu, Lord Duan Chun was suddenly killed. Yu Ruifeng suddenly emitted a fierce aura. How dare you offend me? You're courting death. Dozens of miles away from the western wilderness city, Ling Shiqi took back the spirit fox lotus bow and said to himself, no matter who betrayed me, I'll just kill them all. Chapter 648. A mysterious expert had killed 2 people in the Dark Thunder Manor. One was the supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards, and the other was the adopted son of eunuch Gao. Although Yu Ruifeng had sealed off the news, the commotion caused by Ling Shiqi's attack was not small, especially when Duan Chun died in the crowd. Therefore, the news slowly spread. At this time, the Western Desolation City was very tense. Ordinary people might not feel much, but the city guards and the Dark Thunder Guards were in a state of panic. They did not dare to be careless in the slightest, for fear that something would happen to the people of the diplomatic mission. In the end, nothing happened to the diplomatic mission, but the Dark Thunder Guards were the ones in trouble. As a result, Yu Ruifeng could not help but suspect that it was the work of a certain diplomatic mission. But on second thought, of the 3 diplomatic groups that had arrived, the Zhu Lu country and the Bei Lu country were both vassals of the Thunderblaze dynasty. No matter how bold they were, they wouldn't dare to assassinate the Dark Lightning Guards. Therefore, the Great Moon clan was the most suspicious. This was only a suspicion. In Yu Ruifeng's opinion, even if the Great Moon clan did not have good intentions, they would not cause trouble so soon after arriving in the Western Desolation City. Wasn't this too ostentatious? It would be too easy for people to associate it with them. Yu Ruifeng sat in his study. The more he thought about it, the more his head hurt. He could not figure out who did it, nor could he understand why Gao Yi and Duan Chun were killed. The 2 of them did not seem to have any connection. Duan Chun had never even heard of Gao Yi's name. Therefore, the 2 of them did not seem to have anything in common. However, the 2 of them were killed at the same time. It was clear that there was some connection. Sigh. Yu Ruifeng sighed deeply. Investigating the diplomatic mission and secretly protecting them had already given him a headache. Now that such a thing had happened, he did not know how to deal with it. Duan Chun's death was sudden, but Yu Ruifeng had someone who could temporarily replace the supervisor. At least it would not delay matters. However, Gao Yi was also dead. How could he explain this to eunuch Gao? Leng Shiqi had also disappeared for a long time. If something happened to him, Yu Ruifeng was afraid that eunuch Gao would directly chop him up with a knife. He had also specially ordered the city to be under martial law. He even personally tracked the assassin's aura, but in the end, it was to no avail. He had no choice but to reassign more people to protect Lian Yi and the several great inspectors, hoping that no more accidents would occur. As for the 3 diplomatic missions that had already arrived, they were all extremely shocked when they heard the news. There was actually someone who dared to kill someone in the Dark Thunder manner? This was a public slap to the Dark Lightning Guards and the Thunderblaze dynasty's face. Of course, they were more or less a little worried. Why didn't you kill them earlier or later? Why did you have to kill them after they had entered the western desolated city? Wasn't this turning the suspicion onto them? Therefore, Zhu Lu country's King Gus and the other 2 diplomatic missions were secretly cursing. Meanwhile, the murderer who killed Gao Yi and Duan Chun was hiding in the western desolation city, eating and drinking uncomfortably. Leng Shiqi had also been to the western wasteland city several times, but he hadn't had the chance to take a good stroll. Here, merchants from the 6 countries of the western regions were gathered, and there were all kinds of rare treasures and exotic toys. It was indeed very lively. In any case, he had already killed the 2 most suspicious people. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, he purposely waited for a period of time before showing himself again. Since he had nothing to do, he would disguise himself and stroll around the western desolation city. When he was tired, he would find an inn to stay and slowly cultivate. Until 10 days later, Leng Shiqi swaggered into the Dark Thunder Manor's main gate. Not long after he walked through the gate, Yu Ruifeng and Lian Yi quickly walked over. Yu Ruifeng smiled from afar and said, "You're finally back." Leng Shiqi cupped his hands and said, "I ran into a little trouble on the way and was delayed for a while. Sorry for making you worry." Soon after, the 3 of them came to Yu Ruifeng's study. Leng Shiqi took out all the information he had gathered in the 6 countries of the western regions. Yu Ruifeng looked at it with rapt attention for a long time and said, "The information Lord Lu obtained is too precious. What you did alone is enough to match up to several hundred Dark Lightning Guards. No, this is already not something that can be measured by quantity. It can be said that Lord Lu used your own strength to complete more than half of the mission. I admire you, I admire you." He was full of praise for Leng Shiqi. Lian Yi also looked at Leng Shiqi with sparkling eyes. Leng Shiqi said a few words of modesty. Then he looked around casually and asked curiously, "Why didn't I see eunuch Gao Yi?" As soon as he said this, Yu Ruifeng and Lian Ye's expressions froze. Yu Ruifeng told him what had happened 10 days ago in a calm voice. Leng Shiqi immediately stood up with a shocked look. Then he said angrily, "How lawless! Who dares to commit murder openly in the Dark Thunder Manor? If I find out who it is, I will skin him alive and pull out his tendons to taste all the punishments in the world." Yu Ruifeng said, "Don't worry. I've also been chasing the assassin these days, but unfortunately, I found nothing. It can be seen that the man came prepared. And the assassin's strength is also very strong. Although he is in the gang's spirit realm, he can kill Gao Yi instantly. It's really rare." Hearing that Yu Ruifeng didn't find anything, Leng Shiqi was relieved. What he was most worried about these days was that Yu Ruifeng would find some clues. After all, Yu Ruifeng was the inspector, and his investigation ability was absolutely top-notch. Now it seemed that he didn't suspect Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi sat down and said, "Now the western wilderness city is really troubled. I think the most urgent thing now is to ensure the safety of all the diplomatic missions. As soon as all the diplomatic missions arrive, we will set off for the imperial capital immediately." Yu Ruifeng nodded and said, "I think so too." 2 days ago, the diplomatic missions of the Jushur state and the Golden Tribe arrived. Only the people of the Tuoba state and the Starfall dynasty are left. When all the diplomatic missions leave the Western Wilderness Prefecture, the pressure on us will be much less. But I have reported Gao Yi's death to Eunuch Gao, but I haven't received any reply. To be honest, I am also prepared to resign from my position as the inspector. Ling Shiqi knew that Eunuch Gao would definitely suspect him, so he still had to go through Eunuch Gao. He said, Gao Yi's death is too strange, but it has nothing to do with Lord Yu. Eunuch Gao is a reasonable person, so I don't think he will blame Lord Yu. Actually, it doesn't matter to me whether he blames me or not. Yu Ruifeng said carelessly, I was planning to resign from my position as the inspector to focus on cultivation. Maybe I will have a chance to make a breakthrough. Ling Shiqi chatted with them for a while, then excused himself. After that, he went into seclusion. Another half a month passed, and the diplomatic missions of the Starfall dynasty and the Tuoba state arrived at the Western Wilderness City. Yu Ruifeng and the city lord of the Western Wilderness City hit it off, and arranged for all the diplomatic missions to set off for the imperial capital as quickly as possible. Of course, these people couldn't use the interdomain transfer formation, so they could only walk. And the speed of the diplomatic missions was very slow, so it would take them about 3 months to reach the imperial capital. Lei Qingjuan's birthday banquet wouldn't be too far away. On this day, there were hundreds of different kinds of carriages lined up at the east gate of the Western Wilderness City, and there were also thousands of guards standing guard around these carriages. In places unknown to others, there were also groups of Dark Thunder guards who were secretly scouting and investigating in advance. The 7 diplomatic missions set off for the imperial capital in such a grandiose manner. Chapter 649. The 7 envoys had made arrangements for their journey to the imperial capital. Every time they passed through a prefecture, they would be escorted by local guards and Dark Lightning guards. After they left the Western Baron Prefecture, Yu Ruifeng's mission was considered complete. However, Ling Shiqi's mission was only half completed. Because he had to follow the envoys all the way to the imperial capital, he led a few of his guards as the vanguard. They had to investigate and clear all the hidden dangers a day or two before the envoys. In the past, this kind of task was very tiring. Moreover, the Dark Lightning guards could not maintain a high level of concentration for long periods of time. However, with Ling Shiqi around, it was much simpler. He only needed to use the supercilious eye and walk around a few times. The only thing Ling Shiqi found troublesome was that it took too much time. At this speed, it would take nearly 3 months to reach the imperial capital. Wouldn't it be better to use this time for seclusion? In particular, Ling Shiqi had recently accidentally used the power of the laws of heaven and earth. He had originally planned to go into seclusion to comprehend it. Unfortunately, he had no choice but to continue escorting the envoys for the sake of merit. It was worth mentioning that he had once saved King Gus's life. The two of them had gone through a life and death situation together. Therefore, King Gus was very enthusiastic about Ling Shiqi along the way. He even introduced the other important ministers of the 6 nations of the western regions to him. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing along the way. Ling Shiqi really did discover some people with bad intentions. However, he was able to uncover these people in advance. As a result, he received praise from many people, including the 6 nations of the western regions and Crown Prince Ing Yuan. 3 months later, the envoys finally arrived at the western gate of the imperial capital. Here, tens of thousands of guards and hundreds of Dark Lightning guards stood in formation to welcome them. The Thunderfire dynasty had also sent several ministers, including Eunuch Gao. Eunuch Gao saw Ling Shiqi and nodded slightly. Ling Shiqi was able to smoothly bring the envoys to the imperial capital without any accidents. This was a huge contribution. This quest would not have gone so smoothly for anyone else. Only Ling Shiqi, who had Byakugan and Fate, could complete it so easily. Welcoming the diplomatic mission was a very tedious process. These people exchanged greetings at the city gate for a long time. Ling Shiqi directly handed over to Eunuch Gao and prepared to return to Xingji Pavilion to rest. When he brought his subordinates to the inner city, he discovered that there were many spirit cultivators from various sects and powers in the inner city. My lord, all the first-rate forces in the Thunderflame dynasty have a quota to attend the birthday celebration. Although first-rate forces are rare, the empire is a vast land with abundant resources. Right now, 99% of the first-rate forces are gathered in the imperial capital. Even if they can only send one person to participate in the birthday banquet, it's still not a bad idea for them to bring their disciples to see the world. He Fei Chen quivered as he spoke. Leng Shiqi agreed with his words. The Thunderflame dynasty had a total of 36 counties, and each county had more or less first-rate forces. If a county had a first-rate sect, then there would be at most 2 or 3 first-rate forces. After all, just a first-rate sect alone would be able to occupy almost half of the county's resources. The rest would not be able to support a few first-rate sections. For example, Donglin County and Muqin County were the same. If a county did not have a first-rate sect, then there would be more first-rate sections. For example, the West Desolate County had 4 first-rate sects and a large number of second-rate sections. The further Leng Shiqi and the others went into the city, the more experts they met. Spirit Astral Realm cultivators could be said to be everywhere, and there were also quite a few Unity of Heaven Realm cultivators. Only during the Emperor's banquet would they have the opportunity to see so many experts. Leng Shiqi returned to Xingji Pavilion and dismissed his subordinates. These few months, they had all been tense and should have had a good rest. Even Leng Shiqi was the same. But not long after he rested, Wu Diao came to the door. Wu Diao walked in and cupped his hands with a smile. Congratulations, brother Xingji, for making a great contribution again. I heard that you came back, so I invited you to a welcome dinner. I wonder if brother Xingji would like to do me the honor? Leng Shiqi knew that Wu Diao must have something to do with him, so he returned a salute and said, then it's better to be courteous than courteous. Hee, but not now. Wu Diao suddenly smiled mysteriously and said, you have to wait until the evening. I also invited 2 people to accompany me. At that time, we will congratulate brother Xingji together. Leng Shiqi laughed secretly. He did not know what Wu Diao was up to. Anyway, he could be idle for a few days, so it was not impossible for him to relax a little. At night, Leng Shiqi finally met the other 2 people. They were Zhuge Puha and Di Chuan. They were more familiar with each other, so after greeting each other, Wu Diao said with shifty eyes, I say, brothers, today is brother Xingji's return. We should celebrate. Also, I have to say that brother Xingji's luck is really amazing. Tonight is the Phoenix Stage conference that only starts once a year. No matter what, we should go and take a look. Phoenix Stage. Phoenix Stage. What the hell was that? Leng Shiqi's head was full of bumps. He had never heard of these names before. He turned to look. Di Chuan also had a puzzled expression, similar to his, but Zhuge Puha's expression changed. Di Chuan asked, Brother Wu, Brother Zhuge, what kind of place is Phoenix Stage? Wu Diao smiled evilly and said, I say, the 2 of you have been in the imperial capital for quite some time, but you still don't know about Phoenix Stage. That is the place that all men yearn for the most, and it is the highest standard in the entire Thunderfire dynasty. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi's eyebrows jumped. He could already guess what Phoenix Stage was. Was Wu Diao planning to bring them to visit a brothel? If the Delta Origi found out about this, he wouldn't know how to explain it, so Leng Shiqi subconsciously wanted to refuse. However, Wu Diao seemed to have predicted his reaction, so he spoke first. Brother Xingji, don't be in such a hurry to refuse. Phoenix Stage isn't as bad as you think. Those who can enter Phoenix Stage are all high officials and nobles. How could ordinary women catch their eye? That's why the ladies in Phoenix Stage are all good at singing and dancing. Everyone is more interested in singing and dancing than anything else. Especially since tonight is the Phoenix Stage conference, it has attracted a lot of people. In addition, experts from all over the world have entered the imperial capital recently. This is a good opportunity to gather information. As for what Phoenix Stage is, let me keep you in suspense. Otherwise, it will be boring. Zhuge Puha also added, I've been to Phoenix Stage before. It is indeed an elegant place. I am also very interested in this phoenix stage. Brother Lu, why don't you come with us? Dichuan also nodded excitedly. The other three wanted to go, so Ling Shiqi didn't want to dampen their spirits. He could only agree. Chapter 650. While Ling Shiqi and the others were on their way to Mulink, three people were sitting in a dark room in Dark Thunder Manor. They were Li Juqing, Li Jugu, and fourth uncle. 3 months ago, when Ling Shiqi and the 7 divisions returned to the capital, they already knew that their assassination had failed again. It was fine that they failed, but Li Juning actually died at the hands of Ling Shiqi. They still couldn't confirm that Li Juning was killed by Ling Shiqi, but it definitely had something to do with him. Ever since Ling Shiqi came to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards, he began to stand out. Li Juqing also tried to suppress him, but in the end, he made a great contribution to quelling the rebellion in Shantai County, slapping Li Jucheng's face hard. Later, Eunuch Gao sent Ling Shiqi to Ningyang County in order to counterattack. This time, he killed Li Zhongtao and took away his money tree. On the way back, Li Juqing sent people to assassinate Ling Shiqi, but Ling Shiqi returned to the capital without anyone knowing. After entering the heavenly tomb, Ling Shiqi killed the 2 younger generation brothers of the Li family, cutting off the backbone of the Li family's next generation, causing the 2 sides to fight to the death. As a result, 3 Unity of Heaven realm cultivators joined forces to kill Ling Shiqi. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed. Instead, they lost a powerful Unity of Heaven realm cultivator. When Li Juqing found out about this, he couldn't wait to rush to the Western Baron province to kill Ling Shiqi. However, he wasn't crazy. He couldn't do that, or else he would be in great danger. At the very least, he would lose his position as one of the 4 great chiefs. At the very least, even the Li family would suffer. This was because Li Juqing was very clear that he and Eunuch Gao were enemies in the Dark Thunder Guards. Eunuch Shintu and Eunuch Hai also didn't have a good relationship with him. Most importantly, the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards, Heavenly Venerable He Yen, already had the intention to weaken the Li family. Once these people seized the opportunity, they would spare no effort to suppress the Li family. In the worst-case scenario, the Li family might be directly destroyed. Therefore, Li Jueqing still resisted the urge to kill Ling Shiqi. However, he could not give up just like that. Since he could not use underhanded methods, he would use other methods. The 3 of them were gathered here to discuss how to deal with the Ling Shiqi head-on. Li Jueqing said coldly, "There's actually something else going on at His Majesty's birthday banquet this time. As Eunuch Gao's favorite disciple, Ling Shiqi will definitely attend. When that happens, we'll have a chance to kill him." "What opportunity?" Li Jugu and fourth uncle asked at the same time. After a series of failures and a huge loss to the Li family, even fourth uncle felt that Ling Shiqi had to die. Li Jueqing hesitated for a moment before saying, "There are only a few people who know about this matter." "Fine, there's no harm in telling you first. In fact, His Majesty is planning to select the crown prince at this birthday banquet." As soon as he said this, Li Jugu and fourth uncle were shocked. The current emperor Lei Qingjuan's health was deteriorating. It was estimated that he could only last 2 or 3 years at most. Therefore, the struggle between the princes had become more and more intense. Even a few months ago, there was an assassination attempt on the 9th Prince Lei Haoqing. It was also from that incident that the princes began to fight with each other. In the past few months, several princes had either been driven away to their fiefdoms or sought refuge with a powerful prince. Currently, there were only 4 people who were most likely to become the crown prince. They were the eldest Prince Lei Haoyan, the 4th Prince Lei Haoran, the 9th Prince Lei Haoqing, and the 13th Prince Lei Haoyan. The eldest Prince Lei Haoyan had outstanding military achievements and had the support of many generals. He was also a great master in the unity of man and nature realm. The 4th Prince Lei Haoran's mother was the current empress. Although he was not the eldest son, he was still considered legitimate. Many of the court officials were in the empress's faction. Not only were there many masters around him, but there were also many strategists who gave him advice. The 13th Prince Lei Haoyan had only one thing, and that was that he was too similar to Lei Qingjun. Just based on this point alone, he was Lei Qingjun's most beloved prince. Especially now that Lei Qingjun knew that he didn't have much time left, it wasn't impossible for him to willfully pass the throne to Lei Haoyan before he died. As for Lei Haoqing, he originally belonged to the middle of the line among the princes. It was because he had roped in the support of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. During this time, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect had sent a large number of masters to oversee him. It could be said that he was in the limelight and had the capital to compete with the others. But then again, he was the one who had started this. Moreover, recently, all the first-rate and peak sects had gathered in the imperial capital. This meant that the other princes had the same idea. Now, they were vigorously trying to win over the various large sections. The power behind them was skyrocketing. As for who would be able to walk to the end, no one could say for sure. Li Zhugu and fourth uncle were so shocked when they heard that Lei Qingjun was preparing to announce the crown prince at the birthday banquet. However, they were also very confused. What did this have to do with them killing Leng Shiqi? Could it be that he wanted Leng Shiqi to offend one of the princes and then use the prince's power to kill Leng Shiqi? However, Leng Shiqi was not stupid. On the contrary, he was extremely shrewd. He would not easily offend a prince. After all, every prince had the possibility of becoming the emperor in the future. Li Zhuqing raised his hand and laid down a layer of barrier. He was so cautious in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guard and the Li family. It was obvious that what he was about to say next was very important. He said, "His Majesty is planning to open Void Scar Sky and let the princes use Void Scar Sky as a trial to determine the next crown prince." Hearing this, the other two's expressions of shock appeared again. The Void Scar Sky was one of the most valuable secret realms in the Thunderblaze dynasty. For example, the Heavenly Tomb was for experts to comprehend, and the Minor Chaos Paradise was for tempering oneself. As for the Void Scar Sky, it was a genuine secret realm. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth inside was unimaginably abundant, but this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that this secret realm would not normally open. This was because the Thunderblaze dynasty had planted and cultivated countless treasures of heaven and earth in this secret realm. These treasures were constantly being nourished in the secret realm. It had been 100 years since the last time the Void Scar Sky opened. What kind of quality would the treasures inside be nourished to now? Even if they just went in for a stroll, they would be able to obtain rich treasures and materials. It was simply picking up money. Li Zhugu and fourth uncle, the two Unity of Heaven and Man realm cultivators, were extremely moved when they heard this. They wished they could go in and explore. At the same time, they also roughly understood Li Zhucheng's intention, which was to kill Leng Shiqi in the Void Scar Sky. Li Zhucheng said sinisterly, "You guessed right. Although the Void Scar Sky can only accommodate spirit cultivators below the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, I have already arranged for many spirit astral realm experts. Ants can bite an elephant to death. No matter how strong Leng Shiqi is, it is impossible for him to survive the encirclement of so many spirit astral realm experts. However, just in case, I still need you to pay a price." Chapter 651. On the other side, Leng Shiqi had already arrived at the Curtain Pavilion with Wu Diao and the others. This place was very large, and the construction was very unique and elegant. If it were not for the beautiful ladies coming and going and the sound of bamboo music everywhere, one would think that this was the residence of some refined expert. The four of them walked into the Curtain Pavilion, and a woman in her 30s or 40s with heavy makeup walked over. Although she was a little old, judging from her appearance, she must have been a rare beauty when she was young. Leng Shiqi, Di Chuan, and Zhuge Puha had all come in their own clothes, but Wu Diao had come in the official uniform of an envoy inspector. This woman immediately welcomed them with a smile. "Guests, please come in." Her voice was slightly hoarse, but it was precisely because of this that it gave off a faint charm. There was a hint of emotion in her eyes, and just a glance was enough to make Di Chuan blush slightly. Wu Diao immediately said casually, "Hurry up and arrange a private room, and call over a few ladies. They have to be at least Earth Chief level." The woman's smile stiffened slightly. The ladies in the curtain pavilion were also divided into several levels, and among them, Heaven Chief and Earth Chief were the most precious. Not just anyone could receive Heaven Chief level ladies. On the contrary, it was extremely difficult to even meet a Heaven Chief. There were even some young masters who would fight to the death for the sake of a certain Heaven Chief. This was a common occurrence in the curtain pavilion. As for Earth Chief, although they were one level lower than Heaven Chief, they were still not something that could be directly ordered by ordinary people. They were also the signboards of the curtain pavilion. Envoy Inspector Wu Diao's status was not low, but if he were to call over 4 Earth Chief at once, he was still a little unqualified. What's more, with so many powerful cultivators gathered in the imperial capital, the curtain pavilion's business had become even more prosperous recently. The resources of Earth Chief were also in short supply. Wu Diao caught sight of the woman's expression, and his expression immediately darkened. Just as he was about to say something, Ling Shiqi directly took out his own command tablet. The command tablet of an envoy of eunuchs. The woman covered her red lips and almost cried out in surprise. Then, she smiled and said, "So it's Lord Envoy of Eunuchs. This servant will go and arrange it for you." The woman brought the 4 of them into an exquisite room, then left for the time being. Sigh, even the identity of the envoy inspector is not useful here. Wu Diao muttered softly. Ever since he became the envoy inspector, it could be said that he had gained a lot of benefits from everything. This was the first time he had hit a wall. Ling Shiqi smiled. Sometimes, identity was really important, and it was very convenient to do things. However, he didn't say anything because he noticed something very interesting. One of the walls in this room was actually transparent. Standing here, he could clearly see the scene outside. Not far from them, there was a strangely shaped high platform. It looked like a phoenix dancing in the 9 heavens. Wu Diao explained, "Mu Link's private rooms are all special. We can see the outside clearly from the inside, but the outside can't see inside." Ling Shiqi understood. This wasn't anything special. There were many similar things in his previous life. As for that high platform, it's the Phoenix stage. We're in for a treat tonight. Wu Diao chuckled. Hearing Wu Diao keep talking about the Phoenix stage, Ling Shiqi couldn't help but be curious. He didn't know what this Phoenix stage was. Not long after, 4 women with outstanding appearance, temperament, and musical talent walked in. Ling Shiqi and the others also had a rare moment of relaxation. More than 2 hours later, the room suddenly darkened. However, no one panicked. Everyone knew that the Phoenix stage was about to begin. Ling Shiqi also looked out with rapt attention, only to see a resonant phoenix cry suddenly resounding from the Phoenix stage. Following that, the phantoms of phoenixes and phoenixes spread their wings and soared into the air, crisscrossing in midair. It was truly dazzling. Immediately, the phoenix and phoenix phantoms froze in the sky. 2 figures slowly descended from the sky. One of them was a graceful beauty. When everyone saw her, their breathing couldn't help but quicken. Not to mention that this woman's appearance and figure could be called a stunner. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was devastatingly beautiful. Just her pair of purple eyes were extremely seductive. Even if one looked at it, one's soul would be hooked. Even the girls in the curtain rain pavilion were stunned. However, there was only one person in the audience who didn't have such a reaction. That person was Ling Shiqi. When he saw the woman, he almost spat out the tea he just drank. That woman was clearly 9 Leave, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Back then, Ling Shiqi had openly brought 9 Leave to the imperial capital. However, after entering the inner city, 9 Leave had disappeared without a trace. Ling Shiqi didn't stay idle after that. If he wasn't running around, he was in seclusion. So, he didn't know where 9 Leave went or what she was doing. Fortunately, he didn't hear any news of demon beasts. This meant that 9 Leave hadn't been discovered. For Ling Shiqi, this was enough. But he never would have thought that 9 Leave would actually come to the Curtain Rain Pavilion. However, Ling Shiqi thought about it again. This place might be quite suitable for 9 Leave. Legend has it that some demons deliberately came to brothels in order to absorb yang qi. Presumably, 9 Leave was in the Curtain Rain Pavilion because of this. Moreover, with 9 Leave's appearance, she could easily attract young and outstanding men. She could also absorb essence without anyone noticing. It was really a good choice. However, this wasn't a long-term solution. If someone noticed, there was still a chance to find 9 Leave. Ling Shiqi gently rubbed his head. He couldn't control 9 Leave anyway. As long as 9 Leave could protect herself, he was too lazy to care. Today, he would just pretend that he didn't see anything. At this time, Wu Diao and the others were a little lost in thought. They didn't notice Ling Shiqi's abnormality. 9 Leave landed on the high platform. She didn't sing or dance. Just a faint smile was enough to charm everyone. At the same time, another figure appeared. From the appearance, this was a great beauty that was not inferior to 9 Leave. The difference was that the other beauty was dressed very plainly, as if she only wore a coat. There was no jewelry on her body. But it was this kind of plain beauty that was even more precious in a place like the Curtain Rain Pavilion. However, Ling Shiqi took a closer look and found that the beauty's chest was flat. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her throat. There was a small bulge there. This was a handsome man with a peerless appearance. Phoenix stage, so that's how it is. Ling Shiqi suddenly understood. What a great phoenix stage. The appearance of the phoenix immediately caused a lot of saliva to be swallowed. Even if these people were rich and had extraordinary status, they couldn't help it when they encountered such a stunning beauty. The handsome man didn't make any extra movements. He just made a seemingly polite gesture and stood with his hands behind his back. When Ling Shiqi saw the gesture, he stood up with a swoosh. Chapter 652. Ling Shiqi's actions immediately woke up Wu Diao and the other two who were still in a daze. They regained their senses and clicked their tongues in wonder. Wu Diao even bluntly said, as expected of the phoenix stage. Not to mention that flirtatious woman, just that handsome man is enough to make people drool. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of hobby. He didn't suspect Ling Shiqi's actions. He thought that Ling Shiqi was too shocked. After all, in his impression, Ling Shiqi was a very lecherous person. In reality, the reason Ling Shiqi acted like this was because that handsome man's hand gestures were clearly the code for the blood seed plan. This person was the third person who had come to help him. Ling Shiqi frowned slightly. Ink Frost Ghost Man had said that he would send 3 people to help him. When he first arrived in the capital, he had met Sulwan and Feng Shamo. One of them was his senior martial sister, while the other was the Blood Clothing Pavilion's pavilion master's personal disciple. However, the third person mentioned by Ink Frost Ghost Man had yet to appear. Ling Shiqi had been on the move for a long time, so he had inadvertently forgotten about this matter. Only today did he remember that he had another helper. However, Ling Shiqi felt that it was strange. He had clearly just returned to the capital today, and he had only come to Curtain Link on the spur of the moment. How did Ink Frost Ghost Man know that he would come to Curtain Link? Just as he was feeling puzzled, a scholarly man walked out of Phoenix stage. He first bowed to everyone before saying, "Honored guests, are you all satisfied with this year's Phoenix stage?" "Ha ha ha, satisfied, very satisfied." A slightly drunk young man slowly glowed with red light as he shouted. "Not bad. This year's 2 beauties on Phoenix stage are both peerless beauties, rarely seen in my life." "What did you say this year? Just tell us directly." The scholarly man chuckled and said, "It's good that everyone is satisfied. The lady on my right is called 9 Leave. It's very simple to become her guest. You just need to take out a high-grade Yao core. Whoever has the most precious Yao cores will naturally have a chance to get close to Miss 9 Leave." As soon as he said this, many people in the crowd were stunned. Every single one of them was filthy rich. If someone were to ask them to take out spirit stones or treasures, every single one of them would be confident enough to do so. But this Miss Julie's condition was actually a Yao core? Actually, Yao cores weren't a very important resource, but the problem was that Yao cores were just too rare. In the entire Starfall continent, only the demonic Miasma mountain range and the northernmost wasteland could be found. Although a part of the demonic Miasma mountain range was within the Thunderblaze dynasty, it was still very far from the imperial capital. The extreme north was located to the north of the Northern Wei Empire. More than 90% of the people in the Thunderfire Empire had never been there in their entire lives, let alone obtain a demonic core. What gave them the biggest headache was that Yao cores were not only rare, but ordinary people wouldn't collect them for no reason. Therefore, there were very few people who could take out Yao cores, and even fewer who could take out high-grade Yao cores. This made many rich young masters stomp their feet in anger. Even if they went to buy Yao cores now, it would be too late. It would be a pity to miss out on this Phoenix stage and miss Miss Julie. The scholarly man had already expected everyone's reaction. He continued, "The beauty on my left has a single name, Hua. His condition is that whoever can give him the most beautiful flower in the world will be able to win the heart of the flower beauty." The most beautiful flower in the world? Many of the guests were confused. There was still such a strange condition. In the past, the Phoenix stage was basically a competition of wealth. Occasionally, there would be competitions of knowledge and strength. But this year, the requirements of the two beauties were really strange. Many of the people present had been hanging around the red light district for a long time. They really did have some rare flowers on them. Immediately, some people took out flowers with strange shapes and different colors. The inside of the stage became magnificent. The next segment was similar to an auction. The guests took out the corresponding items according to the requirements of the two beauties. Whoever could win the favor of the beauties would be able to get close to them. Wu Diao sighed, I don't have Yao cores or flowers. They really don't give me a chance." Di Chuan also came back to his senses. He knew that he did not have the qualifications to participate, so he simply drank his wine and watched the show. Zhuge Puha had a thoughtful expression. No one knew what he was thinking. As for Leng Shiqi, he knew best why Julie wanted Yao cores. Julie's nature is really hard to change. Only Yao cores can help her recover her cultivation quickly. For her to be able to think of such a method, it can be said that her brain circuit is very strange. However, Leng Shiqi was most interested in the flower beauty. He carefully stared at Hua Mei's face and figure, and even searched through his own memories, but he couldn't find anyone similar to Hua Mei. This meant that Leng Shiqi had never seen this person before. However, the Ink Frost Phantom had said that the three helpers he had sent were related to him in some way. Then, where was the connection? Leng Shiqi planned to continue observing. At this time, the bidding for Julie was going on outside. There were only 5 or 6 competitors, and only these few people had high-grade Yao cores. In the end, an elegant young master won at the price of several level 6 Yao cores.